And the camera.
Shouldn't need the camera.
No, that should be
okay. Oh, Lauren, you up there? Are we okay to go? Do we need to do anything, or are you okay just to good to go?
Okay,
right.
Brilliant. Okay, somebody else. So yeah, welcome everybody to our new Grand Round programme. This is the first Grand Round we've done in quite some time here at LTHT, but we're really keen to continue with the programme. And just a really big thanks to the medical digital leadership team for coming today to kick us off with our first Grand Round. And they're going to talk to us about what digital can do for you and your patients. So I just welcome Mr. Steve Bush to come and kick us off. The rest of the team are here too, and thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for dialing in online. Hang on, we just need to be able to move these slides forward. Yeah, so we've got 20 odd people online. We've got a whole bunch of people in Littlewood Hall and a full lecture theatre in the clinical sciences. Oh, we just increased by 20%. That's fantastic. So my name's Steve Bush. I'm an A&E consultant here in Leeds, and I'm also Chief Clinical Information Officer for the past year or so. We're hopefully, we're really keen to reinvigorate the Grand Round programme. It's a really powerful way to get that clinical engagement across specialties, but also outside clinical work particularly. And we're hoping to have a bit of a half-hour sort of presentation and a half-hour conversation, and I'm hugely grateful to my colleagues who will be introducing in a sec for being here, because the Q&A I think will be really telling and helpful. My own reason why I've been interested in this, I was a clinical director for a number of years for emergency and specialty medicine, and then medical director for ops, and became more and more apparent in those roles how important digital was to the care that we can give our patients and empowering our teams for to do so. My own involvement, particularly in the EDANS program, where I remember standing up at senior leaders a few years ago and saying, well, look, if we want to do something different with how we discharge our patient, we've got to do something different. And 18 months later and £750,000, we delivered a project that is really, really impactful for how we care for our patients. So, digital may well be unsung heroes. Sometimes you get these notifications, this isn't working, and then a few hours later, this is working. Well, it just doesn't happen by accident. It happens by the dedication of a huge number of people who want to understand more about healthcare delivery. Engaging the clinical and the digital teams, there's a real thirst on both sides to understand each other's world more. And this is a bit of a plug for my digital medical group, or rather our digital medical group. We've got about 50 people on it with mainly medical backgrounds. And it's a really helpful forum to be able to test out ideas and potential strategies, but also some operational details. So if you are interested in being a member of the very light touch, there's no commitment required, digital medical group, then please contact me. Okay. For those who know how I present, this is not a surprising slide from 1482. I think my point about this is just because things are familiar, and this is pretty familiar, isn't it? Doctor at the left, a whole bunch of people on the right wanting to come and see the doctor for various reasons. Not a million miles away from what we do. There's a bit of a queue. People are waiting in line. I mean, there's no medical multidisciplinary team. There's no organised flows. I'm not sure that the doctor on the left is making contemporaneous notes, but in essence, it's not a million miles what we do. But it's just a reminder that just because it looks familiar, just because we've always done it, doesn't mean to say that we need to keep on doing it. And this is sort of another reason for wanting to be here. Interestingly, digital is a really highly prized commodity. Those people in digital could go anywhere, but they've chosen to work in the NHS in healthcare. And that's an active decision. We've all got the same goals. We've all want to do the best for our patients and our staff. And as I say, we just need to integrate those a little bit better. There's more that we can do to understand our worlds, to get the best out of what we've got. I should mention the Office of the Chief Clinical Information Officer. So we have, it's not just me and say Jeff Hall that you might be aware of as medical CCIOs, but we've got Georgie Duncan, Debbie Hale, Dave Holland, Vicky Faint. We've got Vince Barlow, Jess Darlewell, and Michelle Sykes, all of whom are part of the digital, the Chief Clinical Information Officer, whose role it is to make sure that we get the best out of our digital systems for care for our patients. But sometimes it does feel like a battle. Most clinicians, when asked, will say, "Oh yeah," and the first thing that tends to come out is something slightly negative. And it doesn't have to be that way. There's reasons for that, and we'll come into that. And hopefully in the Q&A, which we hope is going to be a little challenging and interesting and valuable, but we want the same things. We have to strategize together rather than use tactics to get what we the immediate thing over the line. Projects are a really big issue, and Mark Richardson will be talking a little bit more about them in a sec. I mean, we have a project prioritization group, but there's a real resource issue that we're going to come on to and talk in a bit more detail. And just when we're talking about that, we spend as an organisation about 1.2% of our budget on digital, and that includes our homegrown electronic patient record system, PPM Plus, which is an incredible product. It delivers what Epic and Cerner do, but for less than 10% of what the cost of those systems cost. Comparative organisations between 2.5 and 3.5% on digital. So we're really at the bottom end of the curve. And that means that we can keep the lights on. And you're going to hear from John in a sec about what incredible things we've done to make our interface with digital systems so much better as clinicians. And the fact is, you don't have to go and make a cup of tea while your computer boots up. It just boots up, you know. So there's some really important things that we just need to reinforce. But because of that constraint about resourcing, we'll get 2 or 3 expressions of interest about really important, really helpful projects every week, and we can deliver 3 or 4 a year. So there's a massive mismatch between what we want to do and what we can do. And part of this conversation, and which will hopefully enforce others, is to determine what we want to do as a clinical community with the budget that we get to run LTHT in its entirety. And in fact, we're going to set up we've already got identified members of a clinical directors task and finish group to go into that, which will be informed by the conversations we're going to have. Okay, my last slide, the future. So, you know, the future's bright. There's so many things we can do with digital, you know, integration, our 600 plus systems. We know that we are going to be able to get them more integrated, talk to each other better. We're out procuring new things like the PAS and the medicines management system, etc. We've got the federated data platform, we've got the single patient record, and of course the 10-year plan, the analog to digital thread that runs throughout that. We're going to have patients where use more wearables. We're going to have implanted devices with real-time blood results. We're going to have real-time location systems, live bed state, a whole range of things, and of course artificial intelligence. It would be bizarre if I didn't mention that. We're already working with a company called Newton Europe, who are supporting our work. Excuse me. In artificial intelligence. You'll already be familiar with the Analyse X-ray interpretation system, but of course ambient voice technology is another element that many clinicians are quite familiar with already, and reaching out with NHS England to get some pilot work to ensure that we're doing the right thing. So we can see the future. We can all see the future. Everybody's interested in some form of in the digital world. And we just wanted to spend a bit of time talking to people online, people in the room, about sort of where we are and where we need to go. So I'm going to introduce, we've got 3 associate digital directors. We've got John Speight, Mark Richardson and Martin Waugh, all of whom are experts in digital and have run their own divisions within the digital world. I think John's going to take over now, and then we'll hand over to Mark and hand over to Martin, and then we'll be really interested in questions. We're hopefully going to have a good 20 minutes or hopefully even longer for questions. So please think of those questions as our presentation goes on. So I'll hand over to John.
Thanks, Steve. My name's John Speight. I'm Deputy Chief Digital Information Officer. I lead a wide variety, a big team in DIT. We operate the IT service desk and service operations. We also run end user compute, data center team, network and telecoms team, cyber team, and a digital system support team. So it's quite a big, varied list of technical areas that I'm responsible for. The first slide, just give an overview of what we've done this last couple of years. So a couple of years ago, we were the worst trust in the NHS with the most number of Windows 7 computers. We were on the kind of naughty step with NHS England, and we got told off on several occasions. In the last couple of years, we've spent a lot of money, and we've upgraded 12,000 of the computers to new Dell devices, and we're now one of the leading organisations on Windows 11. We're right up there at the top, so we've come an enormously long way in a very short period of time with our end user computer estate. The next one to talk about was our telephone system. So Adam and the Ants was #1 in the charts when we had our telephone system installed, that's the picture of our actual switch at the LGI. We've upgraded that and all of the other 7 systems in all of our trust sites now to the latest and greatest sort of voice telephone system. So as you can see, we've done quite a lot this last couple of years. That's one of our old network cabinets, and that was installed when the Spice Girls were #1 in the 1990s. And you can see it's incredibly complex and lots of wires and cables. And again, last year we upgraded the core network switches on all of the sites, and they're all the link all the buildings together and the networks together. And this year we're currently upgrading the edge switches. So the edge switches are which each department connects all of the computers to, that connects you all together on the network. And they're all newer, faster. They give us a faster bandwidth between all the computers and all the servers. So there's been a big, huge amount of work done on the network as well. The next one that I want to talk about, this is kind of a never-ending story of what we've got, really. So we're a really big organisation, and it's like sort of the painting of the Forth Road Bridge sort of thing. It's 16,000 computers, there's over 1,000 applications, 1,200 servers, over 1,000 of the edge switches I just talked about before, nearly 3,000 wireless access points in all of our sites, and we've got about over 6 petabytes of storage. So there's a huge amount of equipment that we've got and services that we provide. And Mark will go into some of the projects that we run. There's still so much more to do. We've got wireless network refresh is going to be starting next. Data center migrations and data center storage upgrades we're in the process of. We've got quite a few older server operating systems that we're upgrading, and we're in the process of doing that, which will take another couple of years to do. And lots of work around Microsoft 365, rolling out more of the applications and more than Teams and Office. There's lots more in Office 365 that we can get rolled out, which we're working on. And there's also a lot of work in the cyber security area. So we've got a cyber remediation program in play at the minute, and there's lots of work going on to make us safer and make us a lot more secure to prevent from cyber attack. We've also been doing, you've probably noticed fairly recently, we've been doing a lot more kind of engagement events in the last year. So we've been running big reboots, which are where we go around certain areas, a targeted visit, and we go and try and help people with any issues they've got on wards, clinical areas, departments. We're doing another series of these shortly called the Winter Big Reboot. We're going to be doing a day at LGI and a day at St James's, where we walk around all of the areas and see if we can help with a team of us. And we've just finished, we're in the middle of some digital drop-in sessions. So we've done Seacroft, Chapel Allerton and Wharfdale this week, where people can pop to the front desk, where we've got a temporary desk and some of our engineers, and you can ask for help with your laptop or whatever it is that you want. And there's another, just to get a plug in for next Tuesday, there's another digital drop-in session at the LGI in the Rotunda, which is next to the Costa coffee shop in Jubilee Wing. So yeah, that's it really from me. So I will hand over to Mark for his bit, and thank you very much.
Thank you, John. So, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to come along and present. So I'm Mark Richardson. I'm the Associate Director of Digital, working alongside some colleagues here. I look after a portfolio of projects and programs that include things like upgrades to new systems, also looking at regional projects. I also look after the project management office. So they're the organisation, they're the team you send in EOIs. And I also think of them as the sort of PM police. They keep our PMs on track to make sure we're following the right process and so forth. I also have responsibility for the digital capability and training team. So we're revamping that and changing the way that we are delivering training. It used to be very much classroom led and is now more sort of online self-learning videos, that sort of thing. And the other sort of large department I look after is the corporate and health medical records department. So often forgotten about, unloved. They're over in based at Jimmy's now. We're going through a big relocation, but a team of about 70 people there as well. So it sometimes feels like that we're climbing a digital mountain, and you know, when we're going through this process, it does take a long time. It needs, you know, when we're looking at our sort of digital systems, digital upgrades, and so forth, you know, it's similar to climbing a mountain. We need to sort of work together. It takes a lot of teamwork, takes a lot of collaborative working, takes a lot of preparation, and unfortunately, money. Be that sort of directly to buy licenses, software, but also resources. We know as a team that we're, and I think collectively, that we're not where we want to be. We understand that, you know, your frustrations, and yeah, we feel them as well from our side of things, and we wish we could do more. So part of this is, I'm going to use this like almost like a therapy session, but I want to try and sort of articulate a bit around what we do and the size of our teams and what we do with what we've got. So looking purely at the sort of project side of things rather than the health record side, I've got three sort of teams, each of those teams 10 people strong. And so within that, the scope of what we're doing, I think, is quite incredible. So the key systems team, they look after upgrading our PAS system. We're supporting our eMeds team. They're also responsible for looking after Galaxy as well. Any key large project system upgrade, that's them. The maximising our assets team, so that's headed at the moment by Imogen Salmon. You may have come across that team working in collaboration with Martin's team, Claire Green, going out to the trust and seeing how we can maximise more of what we've got. Again, 10 people, 22,000 people across the trust, through 600 systems. There's a lot to go at there. And the other one looked after is is managed by sorry, someone waiting there. Managed by Hayley Miller, and that's what I call the technical and regional programs. So this team's responsible for some of our large upgrades. So just a small list there. Fifth is our new imaging platform that we're looking at regionally. Also looking at genomics, supporting that side of work. Pathology, doing a lot of work in pathology. But again, a relatively small team for what we're trying to achieve. So I've just skipped a slide. Okay, right. I don't think I've ever presented in a screen as big as this, and this elephant has come out a lot bigger than I envisaged it on my PC. But I think it's probably worth sort of catching on that. What we do with those teams in terms of the budget. So Steve mentioned a slither of 1.2%. Of that 1.2%, my area is about 18%, and half of that goes to medical records. So I'm getting around about sort of 9% of 1.2% of trust budget to deliver what we need to do. So actually, the amount of resource we're given to do what we've been asked to do is really challenging. Sort of compounding into that is IT is getting a lot more expensive. You know, so we have historically had a lot of systems which are coming to the end of life or past end of life. And you know, PAS, for example, the new PAS is about twice as much. eMeds is about 3 or 4 times as much. So, and good IT is not cheap. Okay. So it's another challenge. So where can we get this money? And this is partly where the elephant's going to come from. So, or what the elephant in the room is. So DIT efficiency. So when we're implementing a new system, that is going to drive some efficiencies. So looking at maximizing our digital assets, that can help, for example, drive and reduce the paper burden. You know, my medical records department spends about £2.5 million a year. So if we can reduce that paper burden, there are some efficiency gains that we can have there. We're never going to be paper free, but we can certainly do a lot more to reduce that paper burden. And anything we can do means we can spend less on storage off site and certainly less processing here on site. But any enhancements or efficiencies we make within DIT, they'll probably go towards waste reduction. They're not going to be significant necessarily, but every little bit does help. And it is really important to do. There are regional pots. So quite often we hear on about the 20th of March from the centre, they'll say, I've got this pot of money. Can you spend it in 10 days? It can be opportunistic, but it's not strategic. It doesn't really help us, but work with us and we'll see what we can do to make the most of it. But it does come with a challenge that often it doesn't come with revenue spending to support it afterwards. Equally, we don't necessarily have the people here at the moment to be able to they're not sitting on the side ready to just take that thing and go and deliver it. So there is a planning and a process problem that we've got to work together to try and circumvent. And I guess the big elephant in the room is, well, how can DIT get more money to do the things that we all want us to do? And there is no magic money tree, so it can only come from trust budgets. And that would mean that everyone else would have to get less if DIT were to get more. So how do we square that off? How do we work together to give you the assurance that you need to be able to give DIT more money, knowing that it's going to be less for your departments going forward? And I think that is fundamentally, from my perspective, the elephant. So we're not saying we want to just take it. We have to work together. We have to work out how best to see what the options are. So that's the end of my slide. I'm sure I'll probably pose a lot of questions later on. I look forward to that. I'm going to hand over to Martin, who's going to take us through PPM.
Thank you, Mark. I have to admit, I'm looking out at a sea of chairs, and some of them have got "please sit here," which is probably from COVID. And then there's a group of rule breakers over here that I am struggling to process. So forgive me if I go astray. So my name is Martin Waugh. I'm the Associate Director responsible for our EHR delivery, which effectively means PPM Plus as the Trust's main EHR, recognising that there are specialty, maternity, dental EHRs in the Trust as well. So within my area are the business analysts that some of you may have worked with before on developing new features and products within PPM Plus, developers who build them, a small group of students from the University of Leeds that we use as borderline slave labour for building electronic forms that some of you use. So if you enter an electronic form into PPM, it could have been developed and built by a poor student from the University of Leeds. A test team that test everything, and then an integration team who link systems into PPM, but also provide the linkage of systems more broadly across the Trust. And then an implementation team, very small in number, who do their best to get out and implement things, and which I think dovetails with what Mark was sort of talking about in terms of how do we do a better job of maximising. I think it's worth recognising that if we were to purchase one of the big EHRs, what would probably happen is that there would be a mass switching off of, well, there'd be a switching on of the new system on a Monday morning. So you would be using paper on the Friday, and you'd come in on the Monday, and you'd all just be using a different system. I guess what's unique, both as a strength and a weakness of developing PPM, is that it's constantly delivering change. You know, so we had a release last week, we've got another one next week, we've got various things in the pipeline, and that means we can be responsive to the Trust's requirements, but it does give us a problem of how to get that message across to 20,000 members of staff. Because a number of times we spend time on a ward and someone will say, can I do this? And the answer is, you can already do that. It's on the e-whiteboard or it's here in PPM. And it's a real challenge with a team of about 6 people to try and implement it. So we would love to find better ways of reaching out to clinicians across the Trust, because I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges we have in terms of maximising our assets. So I thought I'd give a little bit of an overview of what are we focusing on, and this is all documented in our annual review. And these three elements are very much aligned to sort of trust, strategy, and direction of travel, but it just comes from a sort of a EHR, my world sort of perspective. So leveraging investment is part of what my colleagues have been talking about, but PPM now sits in the cloud. It sits in Azure in the UK South region and the UK West, which gives us great resilience, but it opens us up to being able to use some of the tools that come with being a modern architected electronic health record built for this century rather than some of the competitors which aren't. So whether it's things like tasks, so how do we get tasks rolled out across the organization? It's working really well in a number of services, but how do we get it more generally used? Particularly when we recognize that the easiest thing in the world to do is just to write it down on a piece of paper and carry it in your back pocket. So that is a real challenge to overcome, but a lot of effort's gone into doing tasks, and a lot of the things in PPM are underpinned by the concept of tasks, and it's increasingly part of how we deliver stuff. Obviously, being in Azure raises opportunities, and I'll come on to some of those in a minute. Improving access is partly about improving access to data to people like yourselves. And there's a number of changes going on about the front end look of PPM. In a week or so's time, you'll be able to access the single patient view on the mobile app. So mobile first, how do we get more of you able to use the functionality on the mobile device so that you can deliver care more seemingly on the go at the bedside? But it's also about providing access to our colleagues around the region. So we do feed some of our data through into the Yorkshire Humber Care Record. You can access the Yorkshire Humber Care Record through PPM. So you can, if your patients come from elsewhere in the region, you can see the data that those organisations have shared. And I guess the logical extension of that is how do we extend access to patients? So whether it's PROMs, so we can now send questionnaires to patients ahead of a clinic. And we're doing that with the breast oncology service in the next few weeks. The question, of course, is of our 1.5 million outpatient appointments every year, how many of them should we be sending questionnaires? I don't know. As ever with a lot of this, we're delivering capability, technical capability, and the question really to the organisation is, how do you want to exploit it? But the technical barrier has been removed. So improving access for patients, potentially to their own record, maybe through the NHS app, and then obviously greener pathways. Mark's talked about the sort of how do we get rid of the paper? I think I'm right in saying, Mark, that the two main areas of paper being generated are consent is quite big and nursing documentation. So we're very much focused on nursing documentation at the moment. E-consent is a project that's been led by Mark, supported by our team, and I think that's in a position to sort of accelerate the rollout following a pilot in the coming months. So those will hopefully make a big difference, and every piece of paper that we take out of the organisation is one less piece of paper for Mark's team to scan as well. But when you talk about pathways, it's how do we make things more efficient for clinicians? So in the next few months, once we've been through the approval and assurance with NHS England, we should become first of type for allowing clinicians to download detailed structured diagnosis from the GP record. And that's about trying to get that thread. So if you've been into PPM recently and done your admission documentation, there's a add your diagnosis in a structured form. Now that then feeds through into your ward round. So if you then update it in your ward round, you're not having to enter the same data again. And then that feeds through into your EDAN and it feeds through into your outpatient. And that's about making it more efficient and easier for clinicians to reuse the data and capture it. The final bit that we're close to doing, we've built it, just needs to get the sign off, is you can see the GP records. You can see the GP record now through the GP tab, but what you'll be able to do is click on a button to load the diagnosis into PPM. And that's part of making your daily life, hopefully that little bit easier. And if we can do it with diagnosis, why aren't we doing it with medications? And why aren't we doing it with allergies? Because it's all structured data in the GP record. So that will definitely move forward as fast as we possibly can to make life easier for you guys over the next 6 months. What are we doing right now? So the PPM team is broken up into little squads. One of those squads is very much heavily focused on nursing documentation. So aligning the children's and the adults, NSA and C, child and family assessment, guiding the clinician in terms of, based on that, what do we recommend you do next? Is it the S-scan? Is it the pressure ulcer assessment? And which nursing care plan should you be completing? And so what we're trying to get over the next, probably this side of Christmas, is the first examples of that end-to-end pathway. And then obviously we'll leverage that over the remaining, maybe next year, 2026. We've done a lot of work on e-requests. So this afternoon, I'll be at the Liver MDT, where we'll be presenting external requests into PPM using PPM forms by anybody in the country that then flows through and generates a task for the MDT to triage the patient. We will then reuse that to replace the current specialist referral, of which there's over 200 teams in the trust using old technology that we will uplift, AHPs, microbiology, those sorts of services. So there's a team looking at that will then move on to allergies. There's the third element is AI. So because we're sat in Azure, we're currently looking at how to apply AI over the record, the single patient view. So when you log into a patient, you see an awful lot of data from around the system entered into PPM directly or through integration. The first proof of concept is to allow you to search that better. It's the age-old PPM would search for fluffy cats, but if you use AI, it works out that fluffy cats is also similar to cute cats or fluffy kittens, and it'll bring that back to you. So it's the one example that makes perfect sense in my little brain, but that's what we're trying to do, as odd as that sounds. The question then is, what do we do with it? Because we could put the whole of PPM's record into Microsoft's AI search, and you could ask it, has this patient got diabetes? And it would search through the whole thing and it would find it, not just from the event, the diagnosis event, but through the whole of the record. But that costs money. So that's a complete copy of the data in order to make it available to AI. And I think, touching on the sort of comments that have already made, those are some of the challenges. So we'll prove some of the benefits, and then the organisation is going to have to work out, is that worth the, I don't know what it'll be, £20,000 a month in order to support it? And that's a slightly made up figure. So it could be a lot more. Let's just say it could be a lot more. But that's the sort of thing that we're looking at. And then the final bit, which I think is actually a really good example of where we need to be guided by the business and people like yourselves, which is being in Azure allows us to use something called Azure Communication Services, which is basically what's underneath Teams that you use day in and day out to talk to one another and notify one another of things. We've worked out how to embed that into PPM Plus. So you could start a conversation in PPM Plus and invite other people into it. And we think we know how to notify. We've just proved that we can do it. We think we can notify you if you're on the app, if you're in the system, through WhatsApp, via text, email, of a conversation going on inside PPM. We won't push to WhatsApp, just for clarity, details about the patient. What we would do is say, there's a conversation going on inside PPM that you are invited to. Click here and you'd be taken to it. So it's that sort of thing. Off the back of that, we could notify you of all sorts of stuff. A task that needs doing, a radiology suspicious finding. So you'll start seeing some changes over the next few months about inviting you to enhance your user account. The first thing you'll be able to do is link your NHS mail to it, which will have lots of advantages down the road. But the point being is we will be removing the technical capability to do stuff. But I would imagine none of you want to be pinged every 5 minutes about an OBS that needs doing, or a pressure ulcer, or a this or a that. So where's the boundary in terms of when do we want to interrupt your day, and when do we not? And that's not for me to decide. That's really for us as an organisation to think through and work out. There may be times when taking the EOBS is really, really, really important. And there might be times when it doesn't need to interrupt somebody's day. And that's the conversation that we need to find out how to have together. And at that I will hand us back to Steve.
Thanks very much indeed. And thanks very much for the presentations. So we're hoping to, and we've got 29 people online, and that includes Littlewood Hall, where I think there's a bunch of people in the room, although I can't actually see. So we're going to need to have a way of seeing what they're doing. Horace is at the back. I'm a bit scared about pressing buttons on here, but we do need to have a way of seeing questions that are coming on from colleagues online. So oh yes, fortunately, I've got some digital colleagues in the room, which is quite handy. But what we wanted to do is have the rest of the session. We had a bit of a soft start, so we thought we'd have about half an hour. We got 20 minutes, which is possibly enough. Or if people want to hang around, we're not going anywhere in particular. For questions, and we just wanted to have that sort of, we thought actually the main benefit will possibly be this bit that all we've done so far, and we sweated the midnight oil just to get this to this point. But the real benefit of this is the conversation we're about to have. So does anybody want to ask a question? Oh, loads of thank you. Did you go at the back? Hiya.
The AI is very topical, isn't it? I wanted to hear a bit more about where we're going with that. What are the options? What can we do? Must be people bending over backwards who would like to work with us and Leeds with our own system that we can adapt and change rather than these other bigger, sort of more clunky systems that are out there already. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about it. It sounds really exciting. We as clinicians would love that opportunity to interact with something that would perhaps bring together still what's happened to that patient over the previous month that they've been in hospital, previous week, bring components like that forward on the office of diagnostics in terms of what's the information there, what should our differential diagnosis rather than Googling it or looking at somewhere else. You can have it right in front of you on the PPM system. So I just wondered where we're going in that direction. It could be incredibly exciting.
Thanks, Andy. And just for people on Teams, because I'm not sure how well this mic has picked up your question, but it's really all about AI and how we can maximize the use of that, how we can develop the opportunities that AI afford as an organization. Martin, are you okay to respond in some form? And I'll add in my little stuff.
I can try. I guess we're in really early days, Andy, because you're right. There's lots of people lots of companies who will offer solutions. There's an element about the efficacy of and our understanding of what the art of the possible is and how comfortable we are. So for example, not 4 weeks ago, we approached the office of the CCIO and said, we think it'd be really interesting to see if we could save time by looking at 20 odd years of clinical histories in PPM Plus and seeing whether the AI could generate one. And to which the initial response was, oh my God, no, I don't want the AI creating a clinical history on my behalf. And that's a really interesting response. And I think there's a lot of challenges around what do we feel comfortable with, and there'll be many opinions on it. So I think there's an element of needing to step warily through it. I think there's a question of resourcing in terms of how important, we're doing a proof of concept around the single patient view that will hopefully demonstrate some benefit. But I absolutely know I can't put the whole of PPM's data into a tool in order to make it available, because it would cost an awful lot of money and DIT's budget won't cover it. So there needs to be an appropriate review of the benefits. I think we could probably all write a business case that demonstrated the time savings and the benefits and everything else to it, but that'll take some working through. Engaging with companies is challenging, because obviously the first thing they need is our data, because the last thing we want you to do is to have to duplicate the data into another system, and obviously that therefore is a little bit of a barrier to getting moving. And beyond that, Andy, I don't think my brain's thought it through. If I'm brutally honest, I think we're just starting to dip our toe and realise it's quite complicated. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad answer, but it's probably an honest one.
Yeah, brilliant. And many clinicians are particularly familiar with ambient voice, in some form or other. It has been historically a bit of a wild west, and there's been various sort of national sort of responses to that, particularly the national CCIO giving guidance about how to use AI systems and in what context. I think that Leeds has got a really strong relationship with AI. As I say, we're working with this company, and we've already got some embedded systems, but there's so much more we can do. We've just literally last week registered a bid with NHS England to look in ambient voice technology in the emergency department, but with understanding and learning across the piece. I think one of the reasons why we wanted to have this event today was to engage that clinical community, because we've got so many different, in essence, use stories about how we could use the benefits that AI can afford in healthcare, understanding that it's not all good, it's not all perfect, hallucinations are real. How do we protect our patients and ourselves from the unintended consequences of that? And AI policy, AI boards are coming. Organizations are developing them, and it's very much in the development phase. We don't want to be one trick pony, but all of these things need resources behind them. At the moment, we haven't got them as an organization. So this is, again, trying to understand from our clinical community, where should we be focusing our energies? Where would be the resources for this year, for next year, for the year after? What do we really want to see from a digital offer? So I hope that answers the question. And thanks very much for bringing it up, Andy. There were a couple of other hands. Do you want to? You have to speak quite loudly, I'm afraid.
That's all right. I don't normally have a problem with that. I'm Fiona again, one of the IT micro consultants, and potentially links on to what Andy was saying, but in my mind, one of the biggest inefficiencies of PPM, which I think is great, by the way, compared to other electronic algorithms, but it's just the physical typing. It took me quite a while to work out why moderators take so much longer. And it's not just me, I see resident doctors using two-finger typing. And I think you mentioned something at the beginning about dictation, voice recognition. And is there, I don't even know if that's AI or not, sorry, my digital capacity is not very good, but is there some move for that so that actually we don't have to do it into typing and we can dictate into PPM, and that would, I feel in my mind, that would just make me a lot more efficient. I might be wrong.
Thanks very much. And again, for the Teams audience, just in case you didn't hear that, it was very much about that human machine interface, which currently is still a keyboard in majority, and can we move towards voice recognition, etc., etc. I don't know who's best to answer that.
So yes, I think there's various things being looked at. One of the things that we discussed the other day was you can already do it. So, but this is this point about, have we publicized it and have we got the right communication avenues to get to you? So you can, if you're using PPM mobile, for example, you can on an Apple device, which is what we've put out across the organization, you can use the native voice transcription service. Don't know how good it is for medical terminology and stuff, but that works today. Android, if you're using it on Personal Connect, that we're not pushing that because I think the data goes out of the country. So, but looking at John, but on Apple devices, it stays on your device. So there are things like that that are available today that I think we've just not got our lines of communication. Then of course you've got the whole ePro does dictation. Could you do your dictation into an eForm in PPM Plus? And that's something that we are aware of and looking at. I think we've got a solution today, though.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. We've got a hand up online. I don't know if this is going to work. So, Rory, if you just wouldn't mind just holding your question just for a second, just to see. Lucy, I think we can see you. I don't know if we can hear you, but let's try it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay. I'm not sure. I don't know if Horace, if there's anything you can do, because you're not on mute, but we can't hear you. Could you just pop it into the chat, please, Lucy? Would that be okay?
Sure, yeah.
And we'll just come to Rory, but then we'll come back to your question, please. That's great. We're all learning. It's a great experience for everyone. Okay, Rory, over to you.
That functionality be developed relatively straight away, being around the AI bit that we need. But does that then change BPM in terms of the medical device and how do we where that one?
No, it's an interesting one. We've had a number of conversations about when does PPM become a medical device, and we're really clear on our remit, which is to stay the right line of being decision support versus decision making, and all of the features that we develop have that principle at the heart of them. So we will advise you that a task needs doing. We may well put it on a column. We might develop a pathway that checks at different points, like we're talking about with the prostate service, of doing active surveillance over time. But if you then choose not to do anything with it, that's entirely up to you in terms of your clinical decision making. So I don't think, and I was having conversations with people this morning about how was the best way of charting things like PROMs, because you can absolutely send a form to a patient ahead of a clinic. That's the first use case that we're following. And the result will come straight back into PPM within about a second of the patient completing it. So it's available to you in your clinic. The next logical thing is with the EQ5DL or whatever it happens to be is actually how do I plot it over time? I think there's a conversation going on there about if that data is put into the data platform, is it easier to represent that data through charting as you might do with like Power BI, that sort of industry standard tool, or do we need to find a different way of embedding it and displaying it easily without a great overhead into PPM Plus, which was the conversation I was having this morning. So I'm not quite sure what the final solution of that will be, but that is our direction of travel. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, and thanks for the answer, and thanks for the question. Lucy, it looks like everybody on Teams can hear you apart from the people in this room, so apologies for that. Thanks very much for the question, which is about communication, and I might turn to John for this one. So this is all about how clinicians communicate. I'm just minded of the conversations we've had over the past couple of weeks about a communication strategy between clinicians. Lucy's very articulate about the length of that has made delivery of care more inefficient. So I wonder if you can just
yeah, well, it was just a Vodafone. We had a demo from a product from Vodafone, which is looking to replace the pages, wasn't it, going forward? And it's an app that goes on mobile phones, allows you to contact clinicians and other groups in the hospital. So I think that's certainly something we're going to look into going forward, because the pages are very old and inefficient, aren't they? So
yeah, certainly when I was here as a brand new house officer in 1992, the bleep system is one that I recognise still in use today. So, and that was pre-Adamant, I'm not sure. But yeah, so absolutely, and there are examples of organisations in our within Wyatt that are using analysis. Sorry, the alertive is the one of the many communication strategies, and we're looking to see how we can move away from the very inefficient and also siloed communications that happen at the moment, and have something that could be part of the electronic patient record if that was appropriate for that conversation.
So one of the elements that complicates some of the communication stuff is that you've got to be able to make it available for legal cases. And therefore there's been lots of examples where clinicians have been asked for their emails, and obviously the content of any messaging system, whatever it is, we need to be able to provide it for the coroner and law legal cases and everything else through information governance. So it just makes the whole thing that little. It's a good example actually of where the delivery of it from a trust perspective is actually more complicated than it might seem at first, but it does feel like we're trying to work our way through it.
Yeah, and I think this is all about, okay, the tools can be created, that can be delivered, that can be modified for our use. It's how we as clinicians, and I mean this wider than just people with a medical qualification, but all of the clinical staff use those tools to care for patients. And a lot of these things, it's not clear, particularly to the digital team, for those who don't have much experience of actually the provision of care. It's up to us as clinicians to be able to mold those systems into something that works for what we're trying to do on every day, which is care for our patients. So again, it's all about the engagement and that interface between the worlds of the clinical team and the digital team to get into basically one big world. I'm just seeing Lucy, your hand's still up. I don't know if you want to come back in. Okay, no. So I don't know if there's any more questions. There's some comments on the chat there. Oh, there's another question here. This is about telemedicine. What are we up to in terms of telemedicine, and can we provide patient with an app where we can follow them after discharge? I don't know is there anybody in particular to comment on that? If
we're still using, I think the product, yeah, we still do. We have telemedicine product.
Yeah.
So
we do have a product that we what's it called? Anytime? Something
Anywhere.
Attend Anywhere. That's the one.
Yeah.
So we do have that.
Yeah. So okay. So as a lovely example of that, there are some systems, and Attend Anywhere is one of those. That was a question. Come back, or was it a comment on this? Or right? Okay. But you know, it's again, it's the number of expressions of interest for systems. We need to do this. And then when we actually analyze it, we've got something that does 80–90% of what that is already existing in the ecosystem of those systems that exist in LTHT. I think, though, that, you know, again, understanding what clinicians need to be able to do our work is why we're having these sort of conversations. And although it can be at the level of expressions of interest, that's actually quite a comprehensive application process, if you like. What we also want to do is have conversations with individuals about this would be really helpful. This is why the office of the CCIO are doing the ward walks, but just that digital medical group that I've mentioned, having conversations in there about where are we with this? This could be a game changer. I hadn't even thought of that. Those are the real nuggets of pure gold in the conversation. There's a hand up. So great. So it's a great question about the clinical note bit. Martin, you're probably the best person to answer that.
I missed the last part of it. I'm not sure I'm familiar with the change. We certainly changed clinical note recently so that they were visible in the single patient view, which means that you can now search over them. And it also means that we're actually more transparent with what's in there. There was a ward round type of clinical note, which you should still be able to enter, as far as I'm aware, and it would then appear in the clinical note dashboard alongside all the other types. I might be missing something, so it might be best if can you?
Yeah,
you wanted to add?
Where you see it as changing, you can still see it the old way. And I think your question maybe alludes to what you were saying about the communication. And when I first noticed it, I was like, what is going on here? And then eventually somebody found on the notifications tab or PPO, which I don't know how many people look at that. You looked on the notifications tab, it showed you how to look at it. Basically, get back into go to clinical notes, clinical button, and sort of see it and say.
There's a new thing. It's a really hard. It's a good example of how hard it is because Claire Green and I, but Claire in particular, who's the implementation lead, has been out on ward walks and all sorts of stuff. And the number, and we could literally go from one ward where we'll say, what's the best way of reaching you and communicating? And say, oh, email. And then the next ward we walk into, they go, God, don't send us emails because it's just spam and we don't read any of it. And in the end, we've probably alighted on, God, we just need to get out onto the wards, into the clinical areas and have conversations with each other. Because I know last week she was telling me there was those sorts of questions. And when she pointed out that there was loads of dashboards, because I think everything we build now is a bit of a dashboard because they work on the mobile and it brings lots of data together and you don't need to have multiple tabs open, which we know has been one of the things. There's a top left, it says clinical views, and all the dashboards are in there, including one that just takes you straight to clinical notes. It's those sorts of little things that it's how best to reach you all with those messages so that you're not sat there being frustrated when there's no need to be.
It's the perennial problem of getting the comms out to 24,000 people, or it's probably a small number of thousands of people, but it's still a few thousand people. You know, you can send a weekly briefing. This is the update in PPM Plus, but 15% of people will read that. But it doesn't stop us understanding that the comms have to be there, and there's probably something about how people can respond with queries about PPM Plus that we can then do a bit of an FAQ type briefing and embed that into how we work. I'm mindful at the time. I haven't got anywhere to go because this is my life. But I'm just mindful of the time. But so if you need to, by all means, if you want to keep asking questions, that's great as well. So yeah.
Which platforms we're allowed to use, and that's something that we've already got that's available to us. Obviously, Heidi exists, and then that's NHS approved and it's expensive. So I guess that's more of a future type thing. But what do we have that we're allowed to use now to make things a bit more efficient? But does anyone know?
I suspect the fact that none of us have instantly leapt in with an answer is probably an indication of how challenging it maybe is.
Really
yeah.
Beneficial for people to know things that we know that are out there that we have access to.
Yeah, so I think we're in the process of writing an AI policy. I think would be the first thing to say. I think what we're doing in Leeds mirrors what's going on in the country. There is this new technology out there. It's got fantastic benefits. It's got some real concerns, drawbacks, and potential harms. And thanks very much. It's a really sort of shark-infested pool in which to swim. I think that the principles about sort of only, putting patient data into trusted systems is absolutely key to that. But for example, the ambient voice technology project that we're planning with NHS England, is under a framework which is approved, and that's great. Beyond that, it's a really difficult ecosystem to navigate, and that's why we're doing it cautiously, even though, of course, you can go online and find a million free samples. And there's always that caution of why is this company giving me this fantastic system for free? Well, there's no such thing, ... So we do have to have that sort of, I need to just follow that process. I think if anybody has a system that they really want to understand a bit more, this is why we want to have this connection. So I've got this particular system. I'd like to understand the context of how we use it. Then contact the digital team. And as I say, everyone's got a digital contact within their CSU, and then we can start having those conversations. But it's a complex situation to be in. Rory.
Yeah, sorry, I'm really not breaking that.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be really key. I'm not sure if we're doing it yet or not, because one thing that is increasingly exercising people is digital exclusion and digital poverty.
Yeah.
And it would be great to set them on home and them to be able to input data or using wearables to remote monitoring and so on. But if that then relies on them having either a device or internet access at home, then that becomes a bit of a challenge. And then if you carry that on further to kind of worst extent, then is there a possibility that people with malign influence and using coercive control could potentially use those technologies to bring our patients to harm? I know we're into a very big minefield there.
Yeah, so two really important things about exclusion, digital exclusion, and an element of safeguarding. And again, we're in this completely new world where there may be a whole new element of safeguarding, of potential coercive control that just didn't exist beforehand. I wouldn't pretend to have the answer to that. Particularly as as a society, we're moving much more towards that sort of digitally enabled processes. I would like to give assurance, though, to everybody on the call and in the room that this is something that is being actively focused on. This isn't like oh at some point we better think about this. This is like a core approach to how we assess how this new technology or this potential new technology may impact our patients. And again, it's about the working with the clinical teams, when we want to do this potential project that could help the lives of these many patients, but we need our clinical teams to also say, yeah, but I've got a whole group of patients that this maybe not help or even might make this slightly worse. Again, we need everyone's eyes on that, but it's a really important point. Thanks so much for bringing it, Rory. Any more stuff on the yeah, so Georgie Duncan, so one of our CCIO or deputy CCIO has just put some about the 100% digital Leeds, and so please do contact her. I'm not seeing any more actual questions coming in. There's a bunch of offers. Claire Green also has put some stuff in there as well. And I'm just again mindful of time that we're well over, but we did start a bit late, so there you go. Has anybody got any last minute questions or comments? Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was looking at everyone going, what were you going to say? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so and then there's a whole and this is all about carrying more than one device as a clinical a member of the clinical teams, and then this is about how we can get the right balance of having easy access to trust systems and comms, etc., without putting too much of an onus on individuals, and also implementing, putting undue intrusion into when people have their rest time when we're not at work, because we know how important that is. So obviously we've got the bring your own device work that's actively ongoing to again get that right balance, that we would need to our clinical teams to support us in that conversation, and so we come to an agreed position that benefits everyone to the max. Okay, really mindful of the time. I'll just to say huge thanks to everybody in the room. If anybody wants another 3 sandwiches each, I think we can. Great thanks for everybody who's joined us on Teams. There was a comment about the slides not advancing. I hope we got that sorted, because I only saw that well after we finished presenting. Thanks very much for this. I hope it's been useful and valuable. And hope that this is the first of a really positive series of grand rounds that we're going to do. Won't all be digital, but we just thought everyone's got a bit of skin in the game for digital. Thanks very much to my co-presenters who did an absolutely splendid job, and have a fantastic Friday afternoon, and hope the weekend is kind. Thank you.